Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have John Vespasian to talk about rational, self-reliant living. John is a personal development author of 8 books about history and psychology, including his latest book, Thriving in Difficult Times, 12 Lessons from Ancient Greece to Improve Your Life Today. As a lover of history, he is continuously studying and making notes about what he learns and has found many examples in the past that he feels can help people in society today. John has given many interviews around his research into what made the Greek society prosperous for 1,000 years and what later became its downfall. Welcome to the show today, John.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me on your show.
So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Yes, my path to writing books is a bit unusual because I started to write books out of really irritation and dissatisfaction. I have been reading books about philosophy, personal development, psychology, and also business books, marketing, sales, all kind of books for decades. And at a certain point, we are talking 2007, 2008, I was really fed up. I thought most of the books I read, they are very much unrealistic, superficial. They are not based on facts, and the recommendations they make, they are not practical. So I thought I could write myself the kind of books I want to read. I prefer that someone else did, because then I wouldn't have to go through the writing.
You wouldn't have to do it,
okay, yeah. Look, this is not available in the market, so let's see if I can produce it myself. So I started to write books about personal development based on history, because I'm very much interested in history for years. And I have put both areas together. I have produced now 8 books, and this is what I intend to do for the next decade. So if I manage to do that,
nice.
To produce at least 1 book per year, and it's something I find fascinating because there is so much to learn from ancient history, from Middle Ages, from history of the 19th century. And in a way, I have to say I write the books for myself. This is the books, the research I want to do, the books I want to read. I'm happy that other people like them, because otherwise it would be a bit stupid to write books. But in the end, I follow my own taste, and I say, okay, look, I find this story super interesting. I'm going to research it, even if later on it proves that there are not so many people that like it. But in the end, I follow my nose, I follow my taste. When I find a story which has a lesson, which has insight, you can gain insight from learning the story. Yeah. I'm ready to spend a lot of time doing research just to write a few pages, because in the end, I'm learning myself and trying to become a better human being. And this is the purpose of my work.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about rational living. What is that?
Well, it's a simple idea. It's an approach to personal development. I would say an approach also to philosophy and psychology. It's based on a simple idea, a very simple principle, that in the long term, people do much better in life if they try to make logical decisions, if they try to take a step back and to keep a cool head when we have to make important decisions concerning our careers, concerning our finances, concerning relationships. When we have to make a decision, which is a strategic decision for the future, it always works better if you try to think things over and you try to use logic. Now, it's a very simple principle. When you go to application, it's very difficult to apply because we are, as human beings, we are very much irrational. We take to get frightened. We go into panic mode. We do foolish things one after the other. And this is human condition. This is something it will never change. But the purpose of my books, if I can make my readers and myself 1%, 2% more rational, I think in the long term, it will have a huge beneficial result in our lives.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. I have this, I call it my 99-1 rule. I say that people change 99% of the time when they get hit by a Mack truck and 1% of the time when they choose to change. So that sounds to me like it's kind of along the same lines as your rational living. Because I think what you're asking people to do is wake up and make conscious choices. Is that where we're going with this?
Yes, but I use your example and trying to have the 99% happen to other people.
Right.
And this is why I prefer to learn from history rather than making the mistakes myself. And I think when you look at the ancient Greeks, which is the subject of my latest book, you realize that many problems that we are struggling with today, they already solved them 25 centuries ago. It's just that if we don't spend the time to actually see what other mistakes people have made, if we don't take the time to read ancient literature or theater or philosophy, eventually we have to reinvent the wheel. And this is a very expensive way to live, very expensive way to learn. And, you don't have other possibilities, then, you have to make your own mistakes. But if you can avoid at least the big mistakes, in the long term, you will do much, much better.
Yeah. Amen to that. And so how can we go about learning from history?
Well, I have to say that when I studied history at school, as many years ago, I found it extremely boring. Because the way you get the presentation is like, first, it's very unrealistic the way presented because they presented like a little story where everything fits. But in reality, this way of writing history is boring and it's useless because you get all these big picture presentations, you get all these heroes, the battles and the queens and the kings. And in the end, what's the point? I mean, what's the lesson from all these stories? And the lesson is nothing because there is no lesson. Right. It's just a story. And it was only later on when I started to actually read books myself about history and try to read biographies and to try to really draw conclusions, useful learning from those books that I really started to really enjoy history. Because if you get so disappointed at school that you say, I will never read a history book again, it's a complete waste of time, then basically you are curtailing your possibility to grow, because if you don't learn from history, where are you going to learn from? You're going to learn from the newspapers, from the media, from the magazines. I mean, history is the best teacher. It's the best teacher for personal development, for economics, for any kind of areas. And it's a pity that human beings, we are so stubborn that we prefer to make mistakes ourselves. But I tell you, it's very, 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 very expensive, Greg.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question that you sent over to me. What do you think is the most important lesson from history? And I am just curious as I'll get out to hear your answer on that one.
Well, from having written now 8 books, and I'm writing now the number 9, I can tell you that the patterns that you find in history, in successful cultures, successful people, and also the patterns you find in catastrophes and disasters, they are always the same. And you can say that a society which is prosperous, and we are talking now of ancient Greece 25 centuries ago, they have the same principles that you see today in all successful countries. As you see in the United States or in Europe or in Australia or in Singapore or Hong Kong, you see the same principles. And if you go to ancient Greek culture, you see that the Greeks were able to thrive for 10 centuries because they respected private property. because basically they invented private property in the way we know it today. They invented private property. They have a system which, of course, was not very sophisticated because they were a small settlement, so they didn't need a lot of legal rules. But they invented private property. They respected private property for 10 centuries. And they also respected free trade, which goes together with private property, because it doesn't make sense to have private property, then you cannot really spend the money. So they applied these simple rules, and they became extremely prosperous. And what is really amazing when you look at ancient Greece is that they were surrounded by other cultures, much more powerful, very aggressive sometimes, very stubborn, very much tyrannical, like Egypt, the Persians. And the Greeks, they survived them all. They all collapsed. The Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Persians, they all collapsed, and the Greeks continue to thrive because they have this commercial mentality, this very much individualistic approach that they allow them to be extremely resilient, extremely self-reliant. So they were always willing to trade with everybody, irrespective of the language, irrespective of the religion, irrespective of the location. They would just go and sail and find people to sell their wares. They actually sold many products, and they would sell silver to the Egyptians, and they would buy paper. They would buy papyrus in Egypt and take it to Italy. I mean, they would do all kind of trades, and they became very successful because it was a culture that was very much based on trade, not on aggression. It was very exceptional for ancient Greek culture that they tried to conquer other people. I think it was, except Alexander the Great, who was actually not from Athens, he was from Macedonia, he was from the north. Except for Alexander the Great, all the other Greek wars, they're basically defensive. I mean, if they got attacked, they defended themselves as well as they could. But basically, they always preferred to establish trade relationships, to make money, to live a nice life, to develop friendships and businesses. Much better than doing war, because the few wars they did in their history, they ended up very badly, even if they won. In the end, it was a disaster.
So if I heard you correctly, this most important lesson is cooperation. Yes?
Well, cooperation, I would just say trade, because cooperation can be, I would say, in a sense that you just give something for nothing because you want to feel good. And this is perfectly fair. I mean, the Greeks also had their charities. But basically, trade was what creates friendships. And when people have, like in ancient Greeks, because you have to realize that this is fascinating when you look at it, but in ancient Greek culture, the cities were very small. I mean, Athens never got bigger than 300,000 people. Even in the greatest splendor with Aristotle, Pericles, Plato, I mean, all these great names, the city was still very small. It was 300,000 people. And they managed to build this huge civilization with the small cities that traded with each other, and they helped each other when there was a problem. But basically, people were very independent. And if they didn't like in one city, because they got some problems, as it happened to Socrates, to Plato, to Aristotle, to almost everybody. Periodically, they would get some problems, and then they would just move. And Aristotle moved to Macedonia, and Plato moved to Syracuse, and they moved every few years because the conditions got worse, so they just moved to another settlement, and it wasn't such a big deal. And this is a lesson to learn that a culture which is resilient is very much business-oriented.
Yeah, got it. And so you've used two words in the past 3 or 4 minutes. One was self-reliant and one was resilient. Do they go together?
Yes, they do. And in my other books, the books about rational living and stress, I mean, all the books I've written, I analyze many different biographies in different centuries. And you can see that there is a pattern in people who are successful and who are self-reliant, who are happy. And this pattern shows you that the common trait that you see in all these people is that they develop some kind of skill, whether it's an artistic skill or a business skill or a manufacturing skill. They develop some kind of skill that makes them very self-reliant. And this allows them to move around different cities, to start different businesses, to cope sometimes with huge mistakes they make. And then, of course, since the mistakes can destroy the assets and can destroy the savings, but they cannot destroy the skill. So if you have the skill,
right.
You can always start over in a different place. And let me just give you an example. One of the examples I present in the book. And this is the story of a guy who wasn't a Hungarian guy. His name was Bela Lugosi, and he went to the U.S. I think it was in the 1930s, 1940s, because he was very famous in Hungary because he used to play Shakespeare. Was a great theatrical actor in Hungary, and during the Second World War, he got immediate problems with censorship, and then he tried to go to Germany to get a job in the movies. And of course, he could not speak German, so he didn't go very far. And in the end, he went to the U.S. And when he went to the U.S., this guy who had the skill, I mean, he was a good actor, but he was a theatrical actor. And he went to the U.S. He tried to get roles in the theater, but of course, he could only speak Hungarian, so it was a big problem.
Right.
He got, at the beginning, he survived doing theater in the Hungarian community around New York. But of course, he didn't make any money. So in the end, he tried to get roles in different. He went to auditions to try to get some roles, and he was completely barren. I mean, the guy could not actually pay the bills. He tried to learn English, but he never actually spoke very fluent English, very fluent American English. He always spoke with a huge Hungarian accent, which is a bit of a joke.
Right.
But in the end, by sheer persistence, he landed a role in the Dracula theatrical play in New York, because they were looking someone to play Dracula, and they saw this guy who was too tall, who was quite mysterious, and he could speak. He only spoke English with a huge accent,
right?
Very, very heavy accent, Hungarian accent. So he said, "Oh, this is the perfect guy to play Dracula." So
course.
he played Dracula on the theater for a couple of seasons, and then he went on tour. To Los Angeles, he went to Chicago, he went to Detroit, and it was very successful. And in the end, the producer from Hollywood said, "Oh, maybe we can make a movie." So they hired the guy to be on a movie, and that was the beginning of a huge success. The skills, the theatrics or the acting skills, Lugosi had the skills. I mean, he didn't like to play Dracula. I mean, this I have to say, because I actually read extensively on Lugosi, because I found this story fascinating. And the guy hated actually the role. I mean, he wanted to play Shakespeare. And he was quite pissed off that he never really got Americans to appreciate classical theater, because he wanted to play ancient Greek theater. He wanted to play Shakespeare. He did a few times, basically to empty theaters. And in the end, he said, okay, then I have to play Dracula. But he really tried every possible way to get out of the role, but he never managed because he was so successful. Yeah. People always saw Lugosi as Dracula. And the guy was really, really angry that he never really was appreciated as an actor, I mean, as he wanted to be. And in the end, when he died, I mean, it went as far that when he died, he was really trying to get a role in a real story. And then when he died, he was buried in the Dracula costume.
Oh, my gosh.
This is really the worst he could imagine, because he really hated to play Dracula. But the story is that in the end, he had the skills. Yes. I mean, he didn't speak English perfectly, but he had the skills, the acting skills, and he found a niche in the market. And this is how most people become successful. If you become self-reliant because you know to do something, you have some skills, you will eventually find a way to exploit them commercially. It is just that it might not be what you have in mind at the beginning, but you can find a way. And this, I mean, I show in my books many examples similar to Lugosi, because this is the way where actually you can see how people become successful. What you read in personal development books, I mean, this idea that you must have a goal and you need to have a plan and you have to follow the plan. I mean, this is real nonsense. Because when you look at real biographies, you see that 99% of the people who become successful, they don't have really a goal. They have a sense of direction. Yeah. And this is something that I really want to stress, because we have to forget about this nonsense about the goal and everything, because it doesn't work like this. I mean, when you look at real life or real stories, you see that people who have a sense of direction, who are curious, who have a deep interest in some area, they develop very well, because they find opportunities, they find ways to use their talent,
Yeah.
But the goal, no, there is no goal. This Lugosi just wanted to get ahead.
Right.
He stumbled upon the Dracula story by chance. I mean, he could have done something else, but it was the right opportunity and he just got it. But he had the skills already and he had the keen interest in the theater.
Nice. In your research, you found the untold reason behind high stress. What is it?
I spent the year researching this book about stress, which I call Consistency, the Key to Long-Term Stress Relief. And I have to tell you, the problem why we can become so stressed is because we try to chase rabbits in different directions. We try to do too many things. We try to do too many things that are contradictory, that do not fit together, and we spend our time trying to put together schedules that are impossible. Yeah. This is something that, like every animal, we try to chase shiny objects. Yeah. But in human beings, this is really an epidemic. And this is the only way to reduce stress is really to get focused and to become consistent. Mm-hmm. And I think that meditation, for instance, will not help much because it will not solve the underlying problem.
Beautiful. And what is your antidote against excessive worry?
Well,
because it kind of ties into the high stress. Because when we're high stressed, we're worrying.
Yes, but it's a very abstract answer. I will have to give you dozens of examples to show, but I just want to give you the short answer. The only way where I have seen in history people reducing their worry, even in times of war, because I've studied a lot of cases also in military history, right, is when they actually are able to assess the situation and to actually put it in context. And this is a very complex intellectual process because when you're facing a problem like, you get fired from a job, or you are divorcing, or you are severely sick, it's very difficult to have a relative approach and to say, look at the big picture, because we go into panic mode and then everything looks dark. Right. But the only way to eliminate worry is to look at the big picture, to see the problems in context, and to realize that if you lose your job, there are other jobs. It might take you some time to get another job. It might require some training, might require moving to another city, but you will eventually make it. And most people who get severely sick, most of them recover if they change their lifestyle. It might take a while, but unless you are really terminally sick, and this is a rare case, you can recover. It's just annoying. And to go from appalling to annoying, it takes a lot of intellectual work, and I present many examples in my books how to do it.
Yeah, and so this is really the basis for why to become self-reliant, because when we are self-reliant, when we're self-aware, then worry and high stress, it becomes less, does it not?
Well, yes, but to be self-reliant requires emotional balance, requires skills, requires sometimes some savings, and it's difficult to get there, especially when you're starting in life and you don't have many good opportunities for jobs, or sometimes you have to move to another city and you don't know anybody. It looks quite a challenging enterprise, but it's only with time. And one of the big ideas in my books is that you have to look at your career in the long term, that you realize that you took the right steps, you made the right decisions, and you become self-reliant as you accumulate small successes.
Yeah. Beautiful. So what one great habit should you pick up today?
Well, this I pick up during my writing of the book on ancient Greece, because a great part of the book, it deals with philosophy and history, but also with medicine, because I did a lot of research about Hippocrates, who was ancient Greek physician. He wrote actually huge amount of books. And one of the habits I pick from Hippocrates is the daily consumption of vegetable soup. And this is something that Hippocrates, we're talking 25 centuries ago, he used to prescribe vegetable soup for all kind of sickness. When anybody came to him and said, well, I have problems with my throat or the lungs or the liver, he would always, the first thing he did, you have to take vegetable soup every day. He wrote a very detailed recipe using potatoes, garlic, onions, he put all the ingredients, and I put this also on the book. And I thought it was a great idea. It's not difficult to prepare. It takes half an hour. But since I read it and I researched that, I said, I think this is great. So while I was writing the book, I picked up the habit, and I recommend it to everybody because I think it has a very positive impact on your immune system and your overall health.
Yeah. We actually consume here at the Urban Farm mineral broth quite often, which is basically boiled down vegetables, the minerals out of vegetables. So I hear you. How does rational living work in a modern world?
Well, it works if you keep a cool head, because we are surrounded by massively rational people and circumstances all the time. And unless you take a step back and you try to become a bit sometimes solitary and to try to think things calmly, you run the risk of being pushed ahead in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult nowadays to find the time to reflect a little bit, to take the right decisions. But there is no option. I mean, unless you make an effort to become a bit more rational and to think things through, eventually you will regret it, because you will find yourself in the wrong situation. You will find yourself in the wrong career. You will find yourself in a marriage that you don't enjoy. And these big mistakes are very, very difficult to correct, because it can take years to undo the damage.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to learning how to become self-reliant. I love how this is all circling around that concept of resilience and self-reliance. This last question you sent over to me, it's quite a curious one, especially with the very interesting times that we are living in these days. And that is 3 solid reasons to be optimistic about our future.
Yes, and this is something that I think we should remind ourselves every day, because I was doing yesterday a show, and the guy said, look, now everybody's depressed because of this and this, and he was telling me all the stories in the newspapers. I said, look, you have to look at the big picture, the bigger picture, I would say. And we have nowadays in the 20th century, we have several trends, historical trends that are very positive. They are invisible to a certain extent because we are in the water and we cannot see the water, but the water is all around. And I want just to mention these 3 trends briefly, because they are here, they are not going to disappear in the next decades, and they are very positive. So the first one is technology, of course. And people are sometimes scared of technology because it's going to be used to destroy our lives, and they become very much paranoid. But you can misuse technology, but it has such an obvious impact on productivity, on making our lives easier, and this is not going to disappear. And we are not talking only technology in the industrialized countries in the US or Europe or Australia. We are talking technology in Africa or in India, where people have smartphones all around the place. And this has a huge liberating impact. It has a huge opening for businesses and for productivity. And this is something that's not going to change. So yes, we have a lot of problems in the world, but technology is a big help, and it's going to be improving day after day, and this is going to generate lots of opportunities. So it's a first factor to be optimistic. Number 2 is the mentality of entrepreneurship, which many people take for granted. Yes. But this is something relatively new in history, that you see millions of people in different continents, different professional areas, different circumstances, starting companies and trying to create value, to create wealth, to create a better life for themselves and for their customers. And this is something that is sweeping the world. It's not going to change, because it's a change of mentality. It's a historical shift that has taken, I would say, centuries to develop.
Right.
And now it's just starting to become a wave. This is not going to change. And this is tremendously positive. And this is going to prevent a lot of problems in the future, because when people are doing business with each other, they don't aggress against each other.
Yeah.
And this is and when people invest money in different countries, they care about the world. They care much more than if they stay home and then just watch TV, because their money is at stake when they invest abroad.
Right.
So this kind of entrepreneurial spirit that we have in the 21st century is going to be, I think, increasing in the next decades. It's really a very positive driver of history, and it is highly underappreciated by the media.
Right.
And the number three I want to mention is the competition between countries. That this is also something which is underappreciated. But you have to realize that nowadays many countries compete against each other to offer good conditions for entrepreneurs, for tourists, for people who are on pension. I mean, they try to offer a good package of taxes, I mean, relatively affordable taxes or low taxes, legal security, a peaceful environment, and they try to compete to offer good things. And this is fantastic trend in history that is not going to disappear because there is an increasing competition to attract entrepreneurs, to attract creative people, to attract skilled professionals. And this is very good for everybody because it increases across the board all the positive factors in society. And this is a trend which is fantastic. It's going to continue in the next decades. And it makes me very optimistic about the future.
Nice. Yeah, we need a lot of that these days. That is for sure. So I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to briefly talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
Well, my biggest failures in the end became my biggest successes.
Love
because
that.
one thing, because I'm quite a persistent, I would say, a stubborn or kind of person. And when I really want to do something, I try to find a way. But for instance, one thing I really enjoy a lot is learning languages. And I have to tell you that it's quite frustrating when you try to learn a new language and you just don't get it. It takes forever to learn And in the end, I remember when I started to learn German many years ago, that I found it so frustrating because it's quite a complex language. You have to memorize it, and it's quite difficult to actually to speak German. And it took me. I was actually on the verge of giving up several times. I said, no, come on, this has to be possible. I mean, there's so many people who speak German. And eventually I managed. It took me a lot of work. I'm very proud I managed to do it. But you have to realize that you need certain level of stubbornness and determination when you really want to do something. Because for me, it was something I found it fascinating. I put a lot of work into it. And in the end, it has proven very good also for my books, because now I can do interviews in German podcasts and radio stations. Yeah. So it's quite an asset. But I tell you, I came to it out of a stubbornness and pure determination, because it's something that requires a lot of work, requires a lot of patience when you learn a lot of language, because you make a lot of mistakes. But eventually, when you manage to do it, I say, wow, this is really great. I now can see part of the world that was hidden, because every language opens you new perspectives. You meet new people. You see many things that your brain was blocking, because as soon as you see something written in a language you don't understand, your brain will just block it out and pretend that doesn't exist. So this is something that I'm very proud of, but I have to tell you, is the result of massive failure for a long time.
Yeah, good for you, because I know languages, they're hard to wrap around, especially when we're adults. What do you consider your biggest success?
Well, my biggest success is that I managed to find the time to write books, despite having other activities. This is something that requires a huge amount of organization, because in the end you have to you have to allocate the time, you have to find the time to do the research, to edit. And I have to tell you, most people who dream of writing books, they don't realize that writing is the least problem. The problem is the editing.
Exactly.
And I remember when I wrote the first book, it took me like 4 weeks to write the book, but then 7 months to edit, because it was such a mess.
Right.
And this requires a lot of trial and error and getting better with every book. Become a bit more efficient. I become a bit faster. I'm able to write, I think, a bit better. But to go from a draft until you have a book which can be read easily, it flows because the language is clear, because it's well written, it takes a lot of effort. It requires a lot of determination. And I'm doing my best. I guess there are geniuses who are able to write a first draft perfectly. It is not my case. It takes me a lot of effort to get to a finished product. Yeah. But it's a learning curve. And I think possibly in a few years from now, I will become much better and much more efficient.
Good on you, man. That writing books is definitely a skill to have. So what drives you?
Well, it drives me what drives me is on the one side, the desire to spread the message of rationality, of business openness, of a peaceful and prosperous society. I think this is a mission. Yeah. And also the passion for writing. I find it intellectually fascinating when you have a concept and you want to develop the concept into a full book, and you have to put all the pieces together, and then you have to polish the whole thing over and over again until it becomes something that resembles a book. It's intellectually, it's a very complex process. I find it very interesting. It's every time you start to write a new book, it's a challenge because it seems like impossible to do the whole process relatively quickly. But it's a game that I started to play now in 2008, and I played with passion, and I hope to be playing it for the next decades with increasing success, I hope.
Well, beautiful. Beautiful. And talking about books, I'm all about education. I have to know, is there one book that has been influential for you in this process in your life?
Yes. Well, I mean, I have many favorite books, but I just want to mention one, which is called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Oh, yes.
And this is a book. It was a book from the 18th century. Mm-hmm. It was written by a guy. His name was Edward Gibbon, a British author. Mm-hmm. And the way he wrote it, I mean, just to tell you the story in half a minute, is fascinating because this is a guy who was relatively poor because he went into the army because he didn't have a big inheritance. His father wanted him to actually get into the army, and then he became a Catholic. He went out of Britain. He went to Switzerland, and then his father made such a pressure on him that he had to convert again to become a Protestant. So it was quite a heavy problem. So in the end, the guy was completely without any purpose in life. He was a bit depressed. He went to Rome in 1870.
Right.
He walked around and then he looked at the ruins of the Colosseum, the ruins of the Forum, and he started to wonder, how is it possible that such a great civilization has fallen so low, that everything has been destroyed, that there are only ruins? He was so intrigued by the question that it became a passion for him. And for the rest of his life, basically for the next 15 years, he devoted all his time to doing research on Roman ancient sources because he learned Latin and Greek very well. He was the only one in the 18th century who actually spent all the time reading all the ancient books. And he produced this fantastic series of books called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is a delight to read. The language is beautiful. I think it's one of the best books ever written in English. And I always find a delight to read it because it is so influential in our culture. And you can see the present world in the 21st century. When you read Gibbon, you see that all the parameters of our world, they were already present in the ancient world.
Wow. So what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, if you pick up only one idea from my books, I wanted to be this one, is that to make your decisions and your planning and you have to plan your happiness with the perspective of a lifetime. Not too long and not too short. I mean, you are not going to live, most of people, I think they will not live more than 100 years, but you're going to live at least 80, 90, perhaps 100 years, and you have to think in this perspective. I mean, you cannot take decisions that are so short-sighted, just trying to solve the problem of the day, and then you are going to actually damage your future.
Right.
You should not also adopt a completely crazy idea that you're going to be immortal, because eventually you will die. So eventually you will have to take this into consideration. But if you think in terms of a lifetime, most of the problems that we face today, they become completely unimportant, because they will not have any impact in 5 years or 10 years. So thinking in terms of a lifetime is completely counterintuitive, but I think is one of the keys to being self-reliant, to being successful and happy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, John. It's been a treat getting to chat with you.
Many thanks, Greg. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah. So your books, you've got 9 of them. How do people find them? How do we find you?
It's very easy. Most people who ever hear from me from the first time, I think they might want to have access to they have a free newsletter. So I would start for that. But it's very easy to find the whole thing. If you just type my name, John Vespasian, on Google, you will find the free newsletter, you will find the blog, you will find the books.
Perfect.
You will find dozens of interviews on different podcasts and radio stations. So it's very easy to find. Just type John Vespasian on Google or on any search engine, and you will find my stuff very, very quickly.
Perfect. John Vespasian is spelled JohnVespasian. And you can find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/rational living. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.